All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Theseus Body and Mind broadcast. This is the first new episode since the broadcast became a podcast as well, so it's really, really exciting. I'm welcoming my guest, Peter Knupffer, today. How you doing, Peter?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Good stuff. So Peter is a very good friend of mine, an amazing coach. He's my coach as well. But I won't do you the injustice of introducing you for you. You can have a go at that yourself. So why don't you tell us who you are? Give us a snapshot of what you're doing.
I'm sure you do a better job of introducing me, to be honest, because I always find it quite difficult. My experience, my bio has been so thinly spread across so many different things and places and people and activities that I really never know where to start. But in a nutshell, right now, all of that experience has just basically funneled me into coaching. So all of those weird bits of the puzzle started to make sense. And now I just help people, just get in touch with who they are, actually, on different levels. We'll just leave it at that for now.
Nice, yes, mysterious. We've got lots to unravel there. That's great. So yeah, just to get things going, just to give, I suppose just to sort of start to unravel that a little bit. Like, why don't you maybe give us a couple of experiences that stand out in your very colourful history up until now that have helped sort of shape your philosophies on what you do and sort of why you do what you do?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, again, I'm going to just I'm going to boil this down because it's what really feels like several lifetimes in just this lifetime that have led me to this, but really rushing through it. Growing up, I had a lot of difficulty because I didn't really feel like I belonged in many places. Like, school was a complete disaster. I was definitely made to feel, or at least I really felt, that I didn't belong there. And that was made clear with a couple of expulsions from 2 different schools. And then I was kind of, I went through a fun time, a fun and dark time, like in my adolescence outside of school as well, where I kind of interpreted that I wasn't welcome in society outside of school as well, because I kept getting arrested, which made me feel like, okay, maybe they don't want me here either. So I felt really quite unwelcome in general society. So my friends at school were the other ones who were sent to the back of the class, or sent to Saturday morning detention, or expelled. And so outside of school, those were my friends too. So my experiences were quite niche. I didn't experience a lot of the things that other people may have experienced, or at least not in the same way. And then so that was all quite formative. There were extreme experiences in that. There were many years of really extreme things happening in those years that I'm not going to even gloss over. But lots of energy, and not very well spent. It wasn't harnessed. I didn't have elders kind of with a sympathetic heart helping me funnel this energy in the way that I would like to be for younger people now, because it's not something that just my generation suffered. This is something that's endemic in modern society. And forgive me, I'm gonna I didn't do the do not disturb function on my phone. Here we go.
Go for it.
And yeah, I don't want all these beeping noises. So what was the question? What were the, yeah, so these, okay, the main experiences are kind of, you know, brought me to this place. That was one, that was one, you know, that was a theme. And then it took a while to get over that. So there was there was substance abuse, there was anger, there was a lack of belonging. And then, you know, long story short, I'll skip a lot of stuff, but I was lucky as well. I experienced something that people don't experience. I've never met anyone who's had a similar experience to this, and you know, they do happen, but you read about them. And what I thought was a, you know, a very common experience at the time is actually like a one in several million or a billion, or I don't know. I ended up by some luck or by mistake in a Buddhist temple in East Asia, and I ended up there not knowing what it was. I was out of money, and I met someone who said that I know a place that'll give you free board and lodge. Just go to this address, and I went there, and so I had just spent more money than I'd ever had in my life at that point on just getting wasted. That's all I ever did. I didn't have any direction. I didn't really have any meaning. I just had lots of resentment. And so I ended up in this place thinking they'd give me free board and lodge. And they said, yeah, sure, you can stay here, but you have to meditate. And I was very confident. You know, I'd spent my youth in London, growing up in London, spending my whole time in the most dangerous areas of London, getting into all sorts of trouble. I was really, really confident and cocky. You know, so I thought, yeah, I can sit. I can do that. You know, that's not difficult. I can sit and do nothing. It was the most difficult, physically painful, mentally challenging, and just horrific experience of my life. Because for whatever reason, I decided to put lots of energy into this. And I never put energy into anything productive or constructive before, I don't think. Maybe as a child, you know, I built a sandcastle or something like that, or a mud castle in the garden. Other than that, my energy went into self-destruction. And I guess maybe this was a different type of self-destruction. It was, but it was a constructive self-destruction, if that makes any sense to the audience. Instead of destroying my body and my bones and all the injuries that I'm still suffering now, I was destroying the ego. And I put a lot of energy into this, and all of the energy I had, all of that anger, all of that pain, all of that just went into this focus, and I just did exactly what they told me to do. And all sorts of weird stuff started to happen. And remember, I never meditated in my life. I never intended to meditate. I never sat cross-legged. That alone was a world of pain. Because also I didn't know at the time. Only years later, I had an MRI. So I have a broken vertebra in the base of my back. So I broke a lot of bones in my adolescence through all sorts of, you know, stupidity and drunkenness and recklessness. And so I didn't know that I had a broken back. I was in so much pain, and I would just tell the abbot of the temple, you know, I'm in agony. I can't do this. And he said, yeah, don't worry, we're all in pain. Just keep going. So I just thought, I've got to man up. I've got to stop being such a sissy. But I was in so much pain, and the pain taught me enormous amounts. I realized that actually it's all just a sensation. What hurts is here. It's the thinking around the pain. The pain's a sensation. It has no power over us. What has power over us, is our thinking about the pain. And then I'm not going to go. There was 10 days of mysterious and mystical experiences after that, which made no sense to me at all. I never had any frame of reference for any of those things. But after 10 days, I felt like this weird process was over. I had shed more tears than ever. I had gone to places without my body. And I had experienced. Basically, I went to places without my body, okay, and without the kind of psychology I have around, my body. So imagine the relief. One moment it was my norm, so I didn't realize. But as soon as I was in this other place where there was nothing, I realized, oh wow, that guy's carrying a lot of pain. He doesn't know it because that's like a fish in water. The fish doesn't know that he's in water. It's where he's been his whole life. And I didn't realize that, wow, I was carrying so much pain. And it was such a relief to be away from that guy. And then when I came back, I was just, I had distance from all of it. Instead of being that person, I was observing that person. And a lot of the pain just, started to fall away over the weeks and months after that. All of my addiction started to fall away. My personality, because I realized that was just a mental construct. Because I had been traveling a lot, my whole life, and I realized that in different places, my personality would be different. I'd learn a new language with a new bunch of people, and I would take on personalities from them. And so, if I swap languages, I speak several languages, then my personality would be different. It's all just thought. All of it's thought. And anyway, so that was a very formative and healing and interesting experience, which taught me a hell of a lot. And I think really that was it. That was the making of me. That was the turning point. And then, after that, of course, I tried to go back to temples and meditation centers all over the place to try and reconnect with that, because I thought that's what happened every time. I thought people went to meditation retreats for all these weird things to happen. And I realized that never happens. I went to meditation retreat after meditation retreat, and nothing happened. I just got more relaxed and more aware, and it was very, very valuable. But it wasn't, like fireworks and mystical experiences and huge shifts in consciousness. And so it was a bit of a disappointment. But then as I continued, that journey and doing longer meditation retreats, I would have really beautiful experiences which would really teach me a lot. But in those experiences, you learn things that but you can't prove to anybody else. That's the frustration. You can't come back with a peer-reviewed paper and convince a Western mind. You can only convince them because if they get to know you, and they realize, actually, this guy doesn't seem to suffer as much as the rest of us. He knows something. Like, what is it that he knows? And that's the only thing that I can kind of bring back, I think.
Yeah, that's amazing. So just to sort of recap, bit of a difficult time at school. Reams of things happened after that obviously, probably don't have quite enough hours to to fit into one interview, and then you ended up on the doorstep of a Buddhist temple, having no experience of that before, and then staying there and just experiencing this amazing kind of life-changing experience. That you then sounds like you kind of went on to sort of chase. It sounds almost like it was the new hit that you were going on to chase then after that. So it clearly, whatever you got from that experience clearly outweighed all the other experiences that you were putting yourself through up until that point, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and I wouldn't say it was a new hit that I was chasing, but for sure, because I was so healed, like I felt so much healing that I didn't really need. I started reading a lot. Basically, I started reading. That happened at 26. I never read a full book before that. So at 26, I started to read. So when people these days say, "Wow, there's a lot of stuff," and I always think that's amazing, because I really only started to learn stuff at 26, and it was it was voracious. I started to read a lot, and but I started to read spiritual books to try and make sense of what happened, and I never really well, and but also it wasn't it wasn't a hit I was trying to get to, because I didn't need any more hits. That's another thing I realized. Even sex, I didn't chase sex. I didn't need sex. I realized sex was also for me just sensations. Sensations were not such a big deal anymore. Because what is sex? Like, if you need validation, maybe, that helps. If you love, that orgasm, maybe it helps. But what are all those things? They're just thought and sensation. And for me, like thought, sensation are kind of almost, they're pretty much the same thing. It's just something to experience. It's nothing that needs to have any hold on you. You don't have to be a slave to a sensation or a thought.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I know that you're a big fan of Michael Neal, because you introduced him to me, and I think he says something like, I mean, he talks about this kind of stuff a lot, and I know that's why you're quite a big fan of his. But he says something like, we feel what we think, right? But it's a converse, it's a conversely mutual influencing relationship, isn't it? And I think that really ends up being the cornerstone of what I end up trying to sort of make sure we're clear on with my clients that are dealing with stress, is that, we are feeling what we're thinking, but we can be aware of both those things. And this is what I really want to go in with you, because you were kind of the catalyst for a big change in my mindset about this sort of stuff. It was interesting what you were saying earlier about perception of pain specifically as well, because literally yesterday I posted a clip from the chat that we did with Mike Shipman, the pro MMA fighter who you also know. And he was talking about all the hours spent in the gym. And in essence, he was saying, what you end up learning is that you don't need to fear pain. You've felt so much physical pain through training and through fights that you've lost, not just physical, but emotional pain as well. The emotional pain of losing to somebody in the gym who you think you're better than, and then going into the cage and losing to somebody there who you think you should be beating, and your ego taking that hit so many times. And all the while, you're training in the background, you're putting in the physical hours on the Versa Climber, which is a horrendous piece of cardio training equipment, throwing up in the corner of the gym. And that was kind of basically what he came to in the end. It was like, in the end, I mean, he's a very philosophical guy as well. Like, he's done a lot of reading into, like Carl Jung and all sorts of things. It's a very kind of like stoic kind of approach to stuff. And that's kind of that's the sort of place that he's ended up, is pain is just perception. I know not to fear pain now, because I've been through it so many times in different forms, and I just reason with it in a different way.
Yeah, he's such a great guy, Shipman. That's where we connected, actually. He was the first MMA fighter I ever met, and so I had a different perception of them. I thought they were just mindless brutes, and he looks pretty brutish. He's a pretty terrifying guy to behold, and he's just such a lovely, lovely, lovely guy. I was just amazed that we really connected, and yeah, that's it. He's such a philosophical guy. We spoke for many hours, and that's it. Fear. That's it. Which was it? Roosevelt, I think, that said that there's nothing to fear but fear itself.
Yeah, that's a great quote.
Yeah, that's such a deep one, because that's it. It's the fear that stops us. It's not just a sensation or a thought. It's that fear.
Wow, I'm just getting like huge rays of sun through my face is illuminated past the brink of overexposure, I think.
It's an omen.
That's it. It's a sign. The universe is showing us a sign. Yeah, great. So before I do want to go into some of the kind of specific practices that you've ended up cultivating, and especially the ones that you've taken me through that have been hugely beneficial for my own mindset and dealing with my own personal stresses and things like that. But before I do that, I'm interested to find out a bit more details about this Buddhist temple retreat and what happened kind of after that, like a bit more of the journey. Like, how long did you end up staying there that first time?
Yeah, 10
And
days.
did they help you? Did they guide you through anything particularly, or were they just kind of leaving you to your own devices?
Unfortunately not. I wish they were more able to guide me through those experiences, because, I did, my culture didn't talk about these experiences. In their culture, as children, they might hear about these things because, they're surrounded by monks and meditation, and it's just very much in their culture. And in my culture, no one talked about these things, and I had no frame of reference. So, but also they didn't speak English very well. There's only one junior monk who spoke some English, and he just would give the next piece of instruction for the day. So today, sitting meditation 5 minutes, walking 5 minutes, and then every day is just, now 15, now 30, now, and then up to once it's an hour, you just sit for an hour, walk for an hour, sit for an hour, walk for an hour. You walk very, very slowly. You basically all day long. They want you meditating for an absolute minimum of 16 hours a day.
16.
Yeah. And this is from never meditating, never even having the idea of meditating in my life, to sitting on a rock. It's not like a Western place where they give you a nice comfy cushion to sit on. You're sitting on a rock, and that's uncomfortable initially. But after several days, you've got these sores on the outside of your heels, and just the thought of sitting down again on that rock, it's so excruciatingly painful, and all of it, just the sciatica, the back, everything. It was just so painful, and I'm so glad. I'm so happy for it, because it made me realize, there's nothing to be afraid of. There's I don't know if it's an Amazonian or an African tribe where their rite of passage is I think it must be an Amazonian tribe. Their rite of passage, they make like a boxing glove out of some plant. They fill it with bullet ants. And being stung by a bullet ant is basically 100% pain. That's like the most painful thing that humans have discovered, basically. And they fill these gloves full of bullet ants and then put it over a child's hand. And then, like, the father and the uncle or two elders would hold the child's hands up in the air, and it would be stung several times, many times, by these bullet ants, and it just has to learn what it learns. And that is, in their culture, when a child becomes an adult. And I think some people might think, right, that's pretty crazy. What a bunch of barbarians, or how primitive, or whatever. But actually, I see that and think, wow, that's the kindest thing, or one of the kindest things you could do to a child. That is, for me, fatherly love. It's not going to be the mother and the aunt holding the child's hands, because that's not a very motherly thing to do. Whereas that is a very male version of love, because that kid, the rest of his life, if he's learnt what he's supposed to learn from that, at worst, he'll he won't suffer as much anyway, because he's experienced that. He's experienced a new level of pain. So everything else, the volume has been turned down. But at best, if you really got to somewhere during that experience, he's learned that, what is there to be afraid of? If it's not going to permanently damage you or kill you, then maybe, there's not much reason to be afraid of most things in life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really interesting story, and the only way I could personally relate to that is drawing on experience from from the military, because and one of the reasons why I believe that we are missing these rite of passage events that lots of traditional populations still have today, that we're missing them in Western culture, is because, as an example, I always reference my hardest, most miserable, toughest days that I had in the Royal Marines as being my kind of like reference point for misery, and everything kind of going forward from that seems relatively easy. I mean, I've used that as fuel and motivation, and not even just as motivation, but as a tool to readjust my mindset during the other stuff that I've done. And like, as an example, I mean, probably the hardest thing that I've done outside of the military was the 100K ultra marathon that I did last year in the Czech Republic, and getting to kind of like kilometer 70 and being already broken at that point. The only reference point I had from there to try and figure out how I was going to do the last 30K was to think about how absolutely horrendously shit the hardest things I did in the Marines were in comparison, and realize, well, actually, I know I'm going to get through this. I just got to keep going. And for me, that has been so powerful. And I honestly don't know how many things I've done outside the military that were tough that I would actually have done if I hadn't had that frame of reference, if I hadn't been through those, that miserable 8 months of initial training, and then like the hardest, exercise and things that I went on like after that point. I don't know if I would have done half the other challenging things in my life after that. I really don't know. And I think that's so important for people to have been through some kind of experience, to have been somewhere close to the limit, just to be able to say, oh yeah, I can kind of deal with anything if I've done that. So yeah, I kind of get that. And I think it's super interesting.
That is a really interesting point, because so we've spoken about thought, right? And so this is a world of thought. We experience our thinking. We don't experience reality, because if we did experience reality, we probably wouldn't see anything. We just see this kind of energy gloop, the quantum field. Whereas that's not what we're seeing. I'm seeing, a window, a mountain, some trees, a lamp. And so all that is really thought ultimately. But without getting too far, what we were saying is that it really helps to have had some tough experiences in the past to know I can do this next thing that I want to do. Whereas, what if we didn't have those experiences? Like when I walked into that temple, I was like, I can do this. And, I was pretty confident, because I had not achieved hard things, but I had kind of suffered difficult experiences. And I thought, yeah, I can do this. But then, what if we haven't, and we still want to do hard things? We need to get beyond thought, in a sense, because what we were just talking about was basically fighting thought with thought. One thought, the sabotaging thought, saying, oh no, I can't do this. The other thought saying, no, I've done that, so I can do this. Whereas what if we want to do something that's so hard that we don't have a frame of reference, or it's so big and we come from a family where we think small, or something like that? How do we do that? We need to go to a place where we just don't take too much, just don't put too much importance on our thoughts. They're just thoughts. When we realize these thoughts, they're just coming. They're not going to stop necessarily. And, if we stop paying much attention to them, they do stop coming in the same amounts. But it's a mechanism. These thoughts, psychological mechanism that is useful. At least it was a lot more useful maybe 200,000 years ago. Now life is so complicated that mechanism probably isn't sophisticated enough, because what it's doing is trying to keep us safe. But we're mostly safe in our lives, but things change so quickly that that mechanism that's trying to keep us safe is saying, no, 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 things are changing too quickly. That mechanism evolved at a time when things moved really slowly. iPhones didn't come out of nowhere, because within just 100 years, what has happened on this planet? What have we done? I mean, other than, destroying half of all our wildlife, but we've created so much. Life has changed so much. That's a source of anxiety for the part of us which wants to move slowly. But even if we're evolving quickly, it doesn't mean we're not safe. It could mean that, but not necessarily. So we have to, what helps is to not rely on our thoughts. Our thoughts are a mechanism that looks to our past. Okay, so I didn't manage to do that, so I'll be able to do this. Oh, I failed there, so why would I be able to do this now? If you've got a lifetime full of failures, I mean, in my 20s, like when I had that experience at 26, there were no achievements in my life. The only achievements were, I shot the headmistress in the arse with a BB gun. That was my achievement. That was my proudest moment. Oh, I got expelled from 2 schools, not 1. Those were my achievements. Oh, I got arrested 3 times before I hit my 18th birthday. That was my achievement. So that was nothing really to be proud of. I couldn't really go out into the world and tell people, I'm credible. Quite the contrary. I was always scared they'd do a DBS check on me, or try and find out my record. So and it's not easy for a lot of people. They're not there yet. But what I try and get people to do is to just not take too much attention from their thoughts. To just go into the future, realizing that we can do all sorts of things if we let go of those thoughts. It's those thoughts that stop us from doing things. That thought of, oh no, well, as a kid I was disabled, or I was labeled with dyslexia, or whatever it was. Whatever the story is, it's just a story in your mind. Truth is, our potential is, we probably can't even imagine our potential, our true potential. And so to go into the future, it's better not to be too hung up on the past. Here's the point I'm trying to make. It's just to be open to what's possible, because ultimately our physicists are telling us that we are, in a field of infinite potentiality. If we just focus on that for a bit, what's impossible? Let's just focus on that. It's a totally different energy.
Yeah, I really liked what you're saying about kind of fighting thought with thought, and how that's not necessarily very effective. And I feel like I'm testament to that being an unreliable way of trying to deal with stress and trying to manage high pressure environments and things. And also testament to the principles that you coach being much more reliable. As an example, I can relate with you turning up at the doorstep of this Buddhist temple and thinking you can kind of attack anything and it'll be easy, because that's kind of the mindset that I had when I left the Marines, sort of feeling of invincibility, like there's no job I can do now that would be harder than that, and there's no stress. I've gone so many weeks with hardly any sleep and all this kind of stuff. And what's really happening there, I mean, you're boosting your ego essentially, but your ego it can only get you so far before it starts getting in the way. And as an example, I went on from the Marines to do some pretty difficult jobs, namely working for very wealthy people in really bizarre environments where you're also not really sleeping very much, and and then becoming self-employed. I mean, that was almost that was the point where I really realized, wow, I've spent this whole time thinking that I'm super resilient just because I'm in great physical shape, and because I've I've experienced these hard things, and that's my frame of reference. And you know, I've done a little bit of you know, I've played with a bit of meditation and stuff, and I felt like I just knew myself so well that I could handle anything. And then there's this big moments of realization, you know, several times after that, like, I'm not as robust as I think I am. Like when things are really, you know, burning on all cylinders, you know, when things are really kind of hitting their max, you know, I was starting to break down. I was realizing that even though I was handling things, especially when I was starting out, trying to build business, you know, I realized that I could handle it, but I wasn't handling it very well. You know, I was super stressed, loads of anxiety, like just, you know, all these kind of experiences anyway, where that led me down the path of, okay, it's not enough to just remind myself, oh yeah, but you were in the Royal Marines. Oh yeah, but you know, you did an Ironman when you never even done a triathlon before. And these kinds of things, they help a little bit, and they do, they kind of inspire yourself, but they are not the remedy when things get tougher than that again. And that's my experience anyway. And I know that other people relate to this because you know, this is what this is what I coach to other people that are dealing with the same sorts of things. But what I'd like to kind of go into now is a bit more detail about the kinds of principles that you coach, because it's been a massive turning point for me. It is practicing this, being the observer and being able to step away from that kind of thinking layer. But again, you're going to do such a better job of kind of talking through this. So I'm just going to hand that over to you. Like, what is this practice of being able to observe sensations, and why is it important? Why is it useful?
Yeah, I mean, this is a big topic, but this is it, though. But yeah, this is the crux, because fighting thought with thought, yeah, it is. It works. I mean, there are whole. That's basically all of psychology, really, psychotherapy. So you know, it has. It's reliable in some circumstances, but it has its limitations, and you just painted that really well. And any psychotherapist, I think, you know, knows the limitations of his particular field, and I think every patient as well probably reaches that point as well. Right, how to talk about this? So for me, this is it. This is the number one, because it's the difference between. So all of this obviously is influenced, you know, by Eastern philosophy, because that's where this all happened for me. So I guess a lot of my language will be from there, but you know, I'm sure anyone who's interested in Christian mysticism would, you know, will see the parallels as well. I'm sure they, you know, although I haven't really looked into Christian mysticism that much, but I'm sure they get to the same place. So it's about not identifying with your body and your thinking, because we are identified with it. And what I mean by that is, so when you hear that voice in your head thinking, you think that's you. That's me thinking. That's my voice. I am thinking. And so if that's your belief, and that's your mindset, this is my body, the voice in here jabbering on all day long, saying how crap I am, or how ugly that person is, or how, you know, it's the ego. You know, it's like trying to put people down to make you feel better because you feel so inadequate, or whatever it is. What did I want to say about that? But ultimately, that's the source of all the suffering, because when we suffer because I am suffering. Whereas if you're able to realize, oh, actually, I'm observing. So this is the meditation I take people through, is to just start to realize, what can you observe? So I'm observing a mountain covered in trees, I'm observing a window, I'm observing some lights, a lamp, all this. So I can see all these things. And then I can also see this body, and now I can also hear some noises outside. I can also hear, your voice in these headphones. I can an interoception, so I can feel inside my body. I can feel the clothes around my body. I can feel the temperature in the room. I can feel sensations in my body. I can taste what's in my mouth. And I can feel this ever-present kind of glow in my chest, and it's always there, this thing. Sometimes, I'll call it anxiety. Sometimes I'll call it love. Sometimes I'll call it excitement. And I can feel, different times of the day in different situations, I can feel, tightness in my neck, butterflies in my stomach. And this is a great practice to start feeling all of these things, because we generally don't. In our culture, we do a lot of listening to that jabbering voice. And we don't value the information we're getting from our body. We value that jabbering voice. And if we really just sat, and this is what these retreats are for, is you just sit and you observe this stuff. And if you listen to that voice for a month, sitting there for a month, listening to that voice, you'll hopefully get disinterested. You'll realize this thing just won't shut up. And it's not that clever. It's mostly mental masturbation, or you're just stroking yourself and at the expense of others. It's actually not that interesting, because as you're sitting there, you're also bringing awareness to the body and what's in there. And what's in there is non-verbal, but it's much richer than all this jabbering. And you start to value that information. And I think to a certain extent, I always navigated using this, what's in my body, just not very consciously. Because, at school and at home as well, I was the youngest of four boys. So at school and at home, I was just told, shut up, you're stupid. We're not interested in anything you have to say. So, and over years and years and years as a child, you just start to believe these people. You start to think, oh, well, maybe, they're professional teachers. They probably know what they're talking about. My brothers are older than me. They get better grades at school, so they probably know what they're talking about. So, I started to believe, well, maybe I am dumb. So I wouldn't really trust my mind that much anyway. But I was always, in London, I was forever putting myself into silly situations and dangerous positions where, the information is coming from your body more than your mind. Because suddenly, when you're in a stressful environment, your prefrontal cortex shuts down anyway. Blood doesn't flow there to the same extent. So you're more going on reflex, and you're more connected to the body. Like, oh, okay, I feel tense, or you're in a dangerous neighborhood. You think, okay, I'm not going to walk down that street for whatever reason. Got a bad feeling about that street. Something bad can happen. And also, I was living in Brazil at one point, and I would get feelings about certain streets as well. I was like, I'm not going to go down there because something terrible could happen. In Rio, at least at the time, I think still it was a very violent and dangerous place if you went down the wrong street. And so there's a lot of information in our bodies, and it's and it's connected to our brains. So, but it's just not the hemisphere that the West values. Our culture really loves the left hemisphere, the hemisphere that speaks in language, that goes out and grasps things and tries to make sense of things, logic, reason. But ultimately, and so we feel like logical, reasonable people, but we're not. Humans are emotional. Ask any propaganda department of any political party, ask any advertising agency. We are not rational people, okay? Or else we're both regrettably salespeople because we work for ourselves. We know that we can't tell people rationally the benefit of our product. We have to, unfortunately, hit some kind of emotional strings, no matter who they are. They could be, a mathematician with a PhD in advanced mathematics. It's still going to be an emotional decision. Okay, so and then so that's interoception. So those I just went off on one on interoception, but so that's connecting with, because we're so limiting to just stay in one hemisphere, whereas we've got this whole system, and we're very we don't know much about our bodies actually, like especially in the West. I mean, in Vedic scriptures, they might have a better, they go into different astral bodies and emotional bodies, all this kind of stuff, and as our science progresses, we corroborate a lot of the stuff that has been written thousands of years ago in Vedic texts. All sorts of different things, different practices. We realized, all these different yogic breathing patterns and whatever. Actually, now we understand our science behind it because we've done it. And so once we realize we're observing all of this stuff, we're getting used to observation, pure observation, and observation without thinking, without judging, without thinking, there's this feeling here, I don't like this feeling. It's just feeling here. And when you have a thought about that feeling, thinking, you're observing that thought as well. And then you observe more of what's going on in the body, and then there'll be another subtle thought of, that reminds me of this. Okay, observe that feeling, or observe that thought. You observe all of it. And eventually, you start to realize everything is observable. And one of the last stages is like, oh, wow, I can observe everything. And you start to feel, this is what the observer feels like. And then you realize, no, I can observe that feeling. The observer doesn't feel like anything. It doesn't sound like anything. It doesn't think like anything. The observer observes, nothing else. And once you can identify with that, you're free from all of this. In any situation, you're not stressed. You're observing stress. You are not suffering. You're observing suffering. Also, this guy's suffering. Or it's not even suffering, because suffering is a judgment, but this guy's experiencing this sensation. It's that. This guy's experiencing that sensation. And to the point, you start doing, you can do superhuman things. Like I remember one guy said, "Okay, I'm going to test you," and he did that kind of, this that thing where you press on this pressure point, and people would usually go and then kind of fall to the ground just from a little pressure on your finger. I'm going to test you, and he just started doing that. He was some martial artist, and like there was no reaction. And he just thought, his nerves are broken or something. I was like, no, I can feel that. I can feel every single bit of it. And that is another really important point that's really worth mentioning, is that we need to feel everything. It's not about suppressing anything. When we get rid of fear, we can feel all of it. Like, Shipman was saying, he doesn't have to be afraid of this pain anymore. In fact, the deeper you observe all of it, because also this observing awareness is very healing. Okay, so if you have emotional pain, you're going to, want to avoid it. That's what we do. So we'll avoid it by medicating it. We'll get drunk. We'll take antidepressants. We'll have sex. We'll go for a motorcycle ride way too quickly, or whatever. We'll do anything to avoid ourselves. Whereas that isn't going to heal anything in the long term. In the short term, maybe all of those things could be a good idea. Maybe not, speeding on your motorcycle, but although there's other things like, in an extreme situation, maybe it'd be good to, take the edge off with a glass of wine, or if some antidepressants that have been prescribed to you, or whatever it is. But in the long term, what I've found is that this awareness is healing. And so if we observe our sensations, and again, like if you're sitting on for weeks on end in meditation, you start to see these things in much more detail, because you see as your awareness moves around your body, it has a healing effect. Because we store things in our bodies. We do. Our memories, our traumas, they're in our bodies, weirdly. I don't know why or how this works. Actually, Candice Pert did some research into this, something about peptides, or I can't remember what. It was beyond me to understand, but that was one of the kind of mechanisms. But yeah, so I don't know. Maybe I'll ask another question, because I'm kind of.
Well, mate, I was just really enjoying listening to everything that you were saying, because I mean, there's loads of stuff that we can sort of touch on there. I mean, and it is a big subject, as you said when you started to kind of go through it. But yeah, I think for me, the revelation, you're talking about, it's important to feel everything, and this is something I always find quite ironic about the general view of Stoicism, as an example. Stoics are seen to be these people that kind of didn't feel emotion, and that's a real enormous misnomer about the whole concept of that philosophy. Like, the philosophy is being aware of all these things. It's not feeling emotion, it's being aware of those emotions, and the relationship between what you feel and how you think, and then how that consequently makes you behave. And I was aware of all of that, and I thought I understood emotional awareness until I started to go through this practice with you. And then the revelation was the point at which I realized that I could literally detach myself from all of that bullshit going on inside my head. So, there's one thing, there's one thing being aware of how you're feeling, but that you're still feeling it, and that you're still caught up in it, and you're trying to rationalize your way through it while you're still caught up in it. And there's another thing entirely, being able to actually step back from it and leave all of that stress or that upset or that anger or whatever it is that you're feeling in that moment, to literally leave it all behind, take a big step back from it, and either stay there for a while and enjoy that moment, or to then start to rationalize it through this much clearer lens of thinking, where you're no longer caught up in those emotions. You realize, wow, in any given moment, in any given time that I'm feeling stress, I'm feeling anxiety, I'm feeling scared, or whatever it is, anger, frustration, in any given moment, I can just step back from that and just leave it there. And then I can stay there for as long as I want. And then I can come back to it when I'm ready to deal with it. Or I can even go away and I can go back through that situation 100 times in my head, and experience it time and time again, and get used to this idea that, things aren't stressful. Things aren't good or bad. Those things are a perception. Your stress, this is the way I try to explain it to people that I work with, is that stress is not a real thing. It doesn't exist in the real world. You can't touch it. You can't put it in your hand. You can't eat a bowl of stress. You can't, put it, pack it away in your bag and take it to work with you. It only exists in your thinking. That's the only place it exists, is in that thinking layer. And whether you get caught up in it or not is just your choice. And don't get me wrong, the choice can be horrendously difficult to make about whether you react to stress or your emotions or not. As the most kind of probably one of the most obvious examples, somebody very close to you dies today, you know, being able to make the choice about how you feel about that is a horrendously difficult choice to make, because those emotions are just so strong. But it doesn't mean that it's not a choice. It just means it's difficult. And it's being able to accept that truth, that we are actually in charge of how we feel, because we're in charge of what we think, but we're also able to step back from that thinking. Even if it's instinctive thoughts, we're still able to step back from it. You know, being able to accept that is just, for me, the most life-changing concept that you can grasp if you want to be able to manage stress and anxiety, or just be able to manage your emotions in general. If you want to be truly resilient, truly emotionally intelligent. And I think that's what I realized, is there's a difference between emotional awareness and emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is beyond awareness. It's being being aware, but actually being able to detach yourself from the feelings that you're feeling. And for me, it's been a game changer, you know, just being able to rationalize every situation that ever makes me angry, even small things like the dog not behaving, and realizing how stupid it is to be so angry about something like that in that moment. And even if it gets the better of me, then I can take it away with me. I can just meditate on that for 5 or 10 minutes later in the day and think, I can relive those feelings in my head and just go through this practice of just stepping back from those feelings and knowing that the next time that happens, I can do that. I don't have to be caught up in that stress at all.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah.
actually, what you said about reaction being a choice, that is the key thing, is that once you're able to just step back and observe everything, and the more you do that, the more you're able to observe, so that in your daily life, you're more aware of the stresses, because the stresses are in your body. You can feel that sensation in your body. When somebody's stressed, it feels like something. So if you spend more time just feeling things in your daily life, way before that stress has reached a limit where you've lost your power to choose your reaction, you know, you're already aware, oh, stress is building up. It's like one of those thermometers, you know, stress is building up. So you can already just take a step back, you know, take a breath and see, oh, what's happening in this situation that my stress is building up. You know, it could also be something like, maybe you need to look after some bodily needs, you know, feeding or watering yourself or going to the toilet. You know, that could be one factor, but it also could be what's happening in this situation that is building stress. But way before you've blown up and seen red, you can just stop the situation and go, wait, hold on, guys. Maybe we can talk about this differently, or maybe let's just start again. Because you know, and there we go. You're not an automaton which is being played by your psychological mechanisms. You're not an algorithm anymore. If this happens, that happens. If you did that, I'd do this. Suddenly you're in control. And like for me, that's like the little self is the ego. And when you're identified with the little self, the ego, you're just a puppet, you know? You're just I don't want to use the word victim, but in a sense, you're a victim of your emotions and you're a victim of your circumstances. Whereas if you can just connect with the big self, the rest of your life is going to be different, because all that stuff that was pulling your puppet strings, those puppet strings are cut. You're observing all of it. You can feel all those puppet strings, but they're ghost strings now. They're not real ones. In fact, you realize there were always ghost strings. You were just letting yourself get played. And now you can just step back, and your whole life is different now. You have choice about everything. You can connect to also, because now that you're connecting to your body, you're connecting to a higher intelligence as well. That's another thing. The more you connect to that, the more you disconnect from your jabbering mind, your ego, your traumas, the little pathetic victim, the more you connect to the part of you that is really just a much bigger self. It's not just a capital S. It's like the font is 64 when the little self is font 9, you know?
Yeah.
Your whole life is different. You can connect to a much, much deeper you, and your work will be much, much more connected to your true purpose, you know? Like I really believe that all of us have something in here that wants to come out. And if we're afraid, if we're in our little egos, it's very hard for that to come out, because it's going to take courage to express what's really in you that wants to be expressed. And we all have examples, either the people that we know, or famous people who we just really know this guy is living his dharma. Like this guy is just on fire, and he loves his life. He loves his work. He's so good at what he does, and he just changes everyone he meets, you know, and millions of people through his YouTube channel or whatever it is, because this guy, he's just inspired. And he doesn't work. It's not work for this person.
Mm.
And I really feel like that's what happens when we can, the more we can connect to that higher self. And it's, it's different for everybody.
And I think actually that last note that you just mentioned there, that it's different for everybody. That's one of the things that makes it quite a difficult sell to people who've not been practicing anything like this already. You know, trying to explain to clients the requirement to practice this kind of introspective work, and again, the key word there is practice, because everybody's always looking for the solution that they can just use at the time that they need it, right? For everything, we all do that. And when people come to me to look at ways of managing stress better, what they want is kind of this magic, or what they're hoping for is this magic bullet that they can just use there and then that will get them out of trouble. And it just doesn't work like that, because everything that we do regularly is a practice, and everything you practice enough, you'll become proficient at. So if you've been practicing your whole life just reacting to your emotions in the way that you've seen everybody around you doing it, and the Hollywood actors doing it in the movies and stuff like that, then you're not going to be able to combat that with just this little bit of knowledge that actually, if you want, you don't have to do that. It's not enough, you do have to go away and practice it. And trying to convince people, or trying to sell this idea that if you practice this, I can't tell you exactly what the benefit is going to be for you. Like, I can give you examples and I can give you my experience, but just trust me, it's going to change your life. It's going to change the way you view everything. But please just do it, like 10 minutes a day of something like that. And so on that, I'd like to turn, hopefully everybody who's been listening, if they've made it to this point, we've just gone over an hour, I'm sure they're grasping the concepts of it and they're pretty interested in some way of being able to use it. So maybe we can just use the last few minutes before we wrap up to turn this into something kind of practical for people. If you were coaching this principle to somebody who was brand new to it, Peter, what would be your kind of go-to? How would you prescribe some kind of practice that people could achieve this with?
I mean, one of the earlier things that I recommend, because we need to get out of our heads, because most of us, especially guys, but not just guys, in our culture, most of us are just kind of neck upwards. We're just in here, and it's liberating to just go south a little bit. And so one of the first things that teaches body and breath, you can do it all the time. Just when you're in a queue for something, when you're waiting for the kettle to boil, in any moment where you just got a minute, or even when you're talking to somebody and they're triggering you, or they're saying something that triggers you. Body and breath, just become aware of your body. Just move your awareness around your body, become aware of your whole body. Try and feel like something around your body. And breath, belly breathing. very important. Westerners, we all breathe through our chests. At the top, the top of our lungs are full of parasympathetic receptors, which puts your nervous system into a fight or flight situation. The bottom of our lungs are full of sympathetic nervous receptors. So, sorry, the other way around, parasympathetic nervous receptors, which are, rest and digest receptors, which basically that's, if you just practice that, just start breathing through your belly. If you've never done it before, it might hurt the first time, but use your diaphragm to breathe, and that is already a shift. That's a big change. But yeah, just do that, breathing. Just focus on your breathing and your body. And that's a great way. And if you want, count your breaths. That's another good way to get out of your constant jabbering, So body and breath, it's a great way to get into your body, get out of your head, just feel that spaciousness to be away from your thoughts for a few minutes. And practice that a lot, because you might feel like that's not having any effect, it's not doing anything, but it really is. You're building new neurological pathways, and you're using a different hemisphere as well of your brain that we might not. Ian McGilchrist wrote a book called The Master and His Emissary. He's a neuroscientist, among other things. And the master in his book is the right hemisphere. The emissary is the left. And Einstein also has a quote saying that we've built this culture on our kind of intellectual mind, when the true gift is our intuition. It wasn't the exact quote, but this is it. I really feel like we've reached a certain limit in our culture now. Life has become so intense that we have to upgrade, or else, we create from our present moment. If our present moment is anxiety and stress, we're not going to create a lot of good stuff. And we can see this happening in our society right now. We're creating a whole bunch of division and more suffering. We all have to learn, I believe, to kind of realize that, firstly, this reality is not what we think it is. There's a lot more to it. We're not on our own. We have a higher intelligence. We're connected to something really, really much greater than us, much more intelligent, with much more visibility. And it wants something good for all of us.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, no, that's perfect. I mean, just to sort of summarize that kind of like practical takeaway there, people could just start to tune into their breath, diaphragmatic breathing, tuning into their breath. Sorry, I've got a bit of a raw throat today. Tuning into their breath and kind of just building that body mind coherence, I guess, or really just focusing on the body. And you can do that throughout the day, and you can do that as many times as you can remember to do it. And that eventually is going to start tuning into the idea that the body serves a purpose beyond the mind, and we can step away from our thoughts. So yeah, that's really useful, mate. And I can just listen to you go on about this kind of stuff for hours, and we definitely will have to have more chats about all the various rabbit holes that we could dive down from here. But that's it for today. That's been a really great conversation. Is there anything that you just want to add before we wrap up? Anything that you sort of would regret not saying?
Well, just that if anybody, I love talking to people. I love meeting new people, and I love sharing this stuff. So peter.coach, that's my website. So you can write me a message over there, book a call with me. So yeah, I'll be happy to make friends.
Perfect. Yeah, and you come very highly recommended from me, that's for sure. So yeah, awesome, great. It was brilliant to have you on, mate. Can't wait for the next one already. And yeah, guys, whoever's listening to this, wherever you're listening to it, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, whatever, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you can get notified about the next ones coming up. Got loads of cool guests in the making for more broadcasts on various tools and practices for resilience and high performance. So I guess that's us done for today. Thank you so much for coming, Peter, and we'll catch everybody soon.
Thank you so much, Mike. I mean, I always love our conversations, and so yeah, many more.
Absolutely. All right. Cheers, Peter. I'll see you soon.
Ciao, ciao. Bye.